Welcome to another episode of Tech Unhinged, where tech gets human, powered by Code District. I'm your host, Rabia Javeed, and joining me today is Wes Bush, the person who quite literally wrote the book on product-led growth. His bestseller, How to Build a Product That Sells Itself, has been read over by 150,000 people worldwide. Over the last decade, Wes has worked with more than 400 SaaS companies and helped them unlock over $1 billion in self-serve revenue. Today, we are talking about something a lot of companies are dealing with at the moment: why so much AI spending produces so little, and what actually works. Welcome to the show, Wes.
Yes, thanks so much for having me.
You've worked with over 400 SaaS companies, but let's start a bit simple. What's a product you personally love using and can't live without?
Oh, this is a fun one. So there's so many these days where I'm just like, okay, you like pick it up and then you're just like, you love using it. Like on my phone, this one's a fun one. It's called Dumbify. It just changes the UI of everything. So it's so simple.
All right.
I'm a sucker for apps like that. So I'm like, okay, this is great. So I use that every day. I mean, I meditate. So I'm like, Insight Timer is great as well. It's super simple. There's the great free plan on that one. So I love that. And I mean, for work, I'm just still loving Claude. Like, just there's so much I just keep learning. And then you're like, oh, and then you can build the agents to do a lot of the repeatable stuff. So I feel like you can just go so deep on that one. So yeah, those are probably my top of mind ones.
How did your thought process around Claude change? Initially it was just an agent to write content better.
I know. And then there's like levels to it too, where it's like when you use Claude Code and then you hook it up with Obsidian, you make your second brain, and then you start breaking everything down into like your little business area pockets, and then you have your life pocket, and then you create like the dashboards and agents for everything. It's pretty wild just how you can do that. And then it syncs across all devices too, if it is in like a, I don't know, an online cloud area, which is great because I travel a lot. So I'm not always on the same device.
Wes, AI has made it easy to ship anything, yet plenty of products still lose customers in early stages. Have you experienced that as a customer, and how do you measure value in a product?
Yeah. So, I mean, with people being able to ship anything very quickly, I just go back to like, well, what is the area you need to differentiate now? And so if it's easy to build anything, it's actually harder to build great stuff. So I'm seeing actually a resurgence of companies talking a lot about quality, taste. What are those hard to copy things where, like, if anybody can just, for instance, actually today on LinkedIn, I saw my friends from Lemlist, the CEO, they launched a new app where it's like you get your 10 leads every single day identified for your business. And none of it, like the UI or anything else like that, like you could easily copy that. It's not something that's hard. And the thing that's actually hard is like, how good is that output? What is that? Like, are those actually 10 people worth reaching out to that could drive your business forward and everything else? It's like, yay or nay. And is it 9 out of 10? Is it 10 out of 10? Is it 2 out of 10 when it comes to the quality? And so that is really where I think the most people have to think a lot about is just like, how good is the quality? How can we get more people to that bar where they're just like wowed? And the things that used to matter, like, okay, the user experience and stuff, is becoming a little actually less important if people don't even have to use your UI, but they still want the output on like, what is your product do? What is the value prop? How can I get there in 60 seconds or less?
Product-led thinking gets talked about as a growth tactic. In plain words, what does it actually change about how a company decides to spend on AI?
I would definitely say like they go hand in hand. Like you should invest way more in AI to get people a personalized experience. I think with product-led growth specifically, it was the last 10 years were kind of like, okay, do your best, create like what we would call personalized onboarding flows, but it's actually still probably like 2 or 3 main flows for how people want to use your product versus now it's like, hey, what do you want to do in the product? And you can have a chat bubble or something like that. And it just does it in your product. That's what people want. They want that custom journey for themselves.
So, one of the MIT studies, Wes, found that 95% of enterprise AI projects deliver zero measurable impact on the bottom line. And even the critics only have half of that number. Is that money dying on the technology itself or on everything wrapped around it? What do you think?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of skunk work little projects, and like we're still at the early stages too of like, okay, can you do things useful? Like if I even think of myself with how I use Claude and all the scheduled tasks I have, like yes, easily 85, 90% of them don't provide any measurable value. So even if you think of your own personal use, there's a lot of waste. But for the 10% that does work, it's a game changer. And it's immediately getting people to think about how can you actually utilize this and implement it right? Because there is a little bit of a learning phase for every company too. So like out of the companies that do invest in waste 80% right now, I'm like, good, that's great. Like maybe next year, you have 20% utilization of that stuff. And even if you just get 20%, will it pay for that 80%? Hell yes. And it will be way better. So I don't actually think it's a bad thing. I think it's just the natural process of learning. There is going to be some waste. And as long as you're wasting it in a way where you're not going bankrupt, then I think it's a great thing because everybody right now, we're in the Wild West era of the AI phase, and it's just going to get better and better. So it's like, how can we utilize it? Do we have good use cases where we can apply this? And where I think product-led growth intertwines really nicely with this and AI is just, this is how your business makes money and how it delivers value. If you can utilize AI to do that better and faster, you're going to make more money. So it's like, if you can focus anywhere, focus there.
Yeah. So, here's an interesting one, and I want you to dive a bit deeper into this one. You live in the world of, products, but a lot of companies come from services. In simple terms, what's the real difference between marketing a product and marketing a service, and which one is harder?
Yeah. I mean, services always focused on the outcome a little bit more than a product would be. Like it's not a means to an end for everything, but it's more like it's a little piece of that workflow. And so if you think of like a CRM tool, great. Okay. You could have the best tool to do that, to manage your pipeline and everything else. But now a service is like, hey, you're going to hire a sales agent that is going to find who you should contact, reach out to those people, book those meetings, and all you have to do is show up on the meeting and we'll take care of it. So even after the meeting's done, it's going to follow up, but then send them the proposal and go through that whole thing. And so what you're buying in that case, it's the whole execution of the workflow. It's thinking about it more like an employee versus, okay, we're selling you this widget called a CRM, which is nice. Everybody needs one, but thinking about it from, okay, the overall output and the work that needs to get done. And I think that's the biggest part where people are headed.
Yeah. How does one pricing decision end up shaping how a whole company behaves? When a business builds by something like the number of profiles instead of the value people actually get, how does that ripple through sales, support, and product?
Yeah. So I recently wrote a nice spicy post on this one for customer.io because I was with a tool like customer.io that manages your emails, SMS, and everything else. They rightly charge based on profiles, which doesn't seem like a bad idea. Like a profile is like, okay, any account or person inside that database that you can contact. Now, when you think about where does the value originate, to a certain degree, it is profiles. Like, okay, great. Everybody's all in one place. It's like a spreadsheet. Whoopee. But the real value, in my opinion, is actually reaching out to them. It's contacting them. That is where the value originates. So if you send an email to, let's say, 12,000 people, and that's all you send to in the whole month, but you get billed on 80,000 plus profiles, it doesn't make sense. There's a gap between how you're charging and then how you are actually delivering value. And so the best value metrics always focus on that last part, which is how do we actually deliver value? Now, you can't all be like Stripe, which is an amazing business model because it's like, okay, if you make $1,000 on, a payment link that you send to somebody, okay, they charge you 2 to 3%, like a credit card. So it's like fantastic, great business. And it's super simple. When it comes to other tools that don't have that luxury, how do you do it? So like Customer.io, you come up with a random metric that you think closely aligns, but turns out it's not always super aligned. So when it comes to AI tools, this is really where it gets interesting. And so one of my thoughts, I was like, over the last 10 years, so many people have been like bashing user-based pricing, rightfully so, because like every company under the sun was like, we don't know how to price based on users because there's value in that. But now we're seeing it's actually just credit-based pricing is the new user-based pricing. And so why that gets me like kind of laughing is because it's so random, yet it makes sense. And it's like, yeah, AI charges based on credits. All the LLMs charge based on credits. So then when you need to come up with your pricing, also might want to consider credits. But then every company, especially as software tools, has a different metric of like, this is how we calculate credits. So then who gets left with the short end of the stick? It's always the customer, because they're like, what is the pricing? How much are we going to get charged? You have no idea. And so what you have to kind of go back to the actionable part here too, two things to take away here is one, your pricing has to align with how do you actually deliver value. So going back to what you talked about with services versus applications, think about, okay, is it a certain amount of work or an outcome that you're going to get people closer towards? Maybe it's closed deals or closed volume or something like that. If you can get to that outcome, charge a percentage of that if you can actually move the needle on that metric. But then the second thing, and this is like the easy part, but hard to do, is just does your pricing pass the 5-second test? So if anybody who doesn't really understand your product that well can look at your pricing page and be like, oh yeah, it's that plan. That's what I would need. Then you passed and you can move on with your life. As long as it still matches the first piece of like, it aligns with the core value of your product. But most AI companies and everything else, I don't see them doing that first piece. And then the second piece of like, oh, how much am I going to get charged? It's still really vague on that end.
No, that's great insight, Wes. So across dozen of AI products, one pattern keeps surfacing that we see, where teams bolt AI onto a workflow that was already broken and just produce the errors faster. What is the most common broken thing founders try to cover that you've seen?
Yeah, I mean, the bolt-on AI strategy is super common because they are just trying to be like, okay, how do we make this current product a little bit faster? But it's a lot like they've studied this a lot in big enterprises. It's like the optimization mindset where, okay, great, like we're going to optimize something like 2 to 3%. Sure, great, do that every year, and you kind of keep improving things slowly, and then eventually you kind of get to a point where it gets really hard, and you hit diminishing returns on that investment, and you're like, okay, we can no longer get 2 to 3% gains. And so right now we're still in the phase where with adding and bolting on AI, you can get a 2 to 3% improvement per year, but you're still going to be exposed to a AI native company that goes through the entire workflow of how to, any category, let's call it even closing a new business or something like that. You're going to have those like traditional CRM companies that are just like, oh, we got an AI agent for meeting follow-ups. Okay, let's bolt that on. We got an AI agent eventually to, update all the fields and enrich contacts. Okay, great. We do all that. Now, then there's the AI native company that says, where does most of the time go? Where do most people waste time? And it's a completely different workflow. They're like, actually, let's reimagine how people interact with, leads and everything else like that. What if they didn't even need to log in to the CRM at all? They just talk with Claude. And every morning we send them, hey, these are the 10 leads you should follow up with, chat within Claude. Okay, we got the emails drafted, we're ready to go. And the entire workflow changes. It's like, what are the 1 or 2 things that these people need to do to actually sell a lot? And then they just work backwards from that. And it would look completely different than the company that just says, hey, we're going to consistently add some of these AI agents to simplify some of the workflows, because you still have the same workflow. It's just a little faster versus let's blow up the workflow and just go through like, what are those 2 things or 3 things you got to do to actually close new business? And let's do that. And so the companies that focus on disrupting themselves right now have a huge advantage, although it's harder to do it if you have that existing one. That's why you're seeing all these AI native companies come out of the woodwork and be like, hey, look, we can do that in a fraction of the time, not a 2 to 3% improvement, but that's why we call it disruption.
Yeah, definitely. So, while going through a lot of your thought pieces, I found that you've said that users really complain before they leave. They just stop showing up. When a company cannot see the people quietly walking out, where should they look first to find a reason?
Yeah, I mean, churn data is usually the best. And so if you have a couple questions when people are canceling their subscription, that's really where you can learn a lot pretty quickly. And I'm not a big fan of like forcing people to hop on a call, but I am a big fan of like, if you can get those people on a call, do it. And maybe you could give them like, hey, 3 months free if you hop on a quick call to go through this whole experience with us so we can make it right or understand everything else. That could be a great option. But what I have seen with some other companies that are like, simple software wrappers, they have a lot of people saying like, oh yeah, people are canceling, just going straight to Claude. It's like, if your moat is just that, if people can just do it in another tool built very quickly, you have a very weak moat. And even if it's, 80% as good in Claude versus your tool, it's good. They're going to catch up and they can already see it and they're leaving proactively. And so you had to get to the bottom of why are people leaving? And it goes back to the previous question you asked of why. Well, the approach is better. If you can manage something, if you can talk to something, it feels faster. It feels like you have a bit more ownership. You don't have to worry about, where do I click in the UI of this tool to figure out that? You're like, no, I just talk. And most people, even in tech these days, they're not even typing. They're just like talking and then it's getting auto AI transcribed and then they don't have to go through it. So it just feels like it flows a bit better. So you have to have a much better approach for people to even consider using your UI unless you just become a connector.
So after 2 years of research across hundreds of companies, you found 9 essential elements that separate the product-led growth success stories from everyone else. Without giving the whole playbook away, what are 1 or 2 of those elements that founders most often miss?
Yeah, the biggest 3 is always comes down to the foundation. So a lot of people will look at product-led growth and they'll think, oh, it's just a free trial. That's all we need to do. We need to, update the homepage, make sure we have a free model that gives people access to the product. I've heard onboarding is important. So let's figure out how to get those people to value a little bit faster. And then self-serve pricing. Okay, we need to have that. So like on the surface, I call it like the product-led growth iceberg. That's what people see. That's what they do. And then they start there. And then it usually doesn't work. So that's like it's disappointment. And they hit the iceberg. And hopefully they don't sink like the Titanic. But the next part is like the foundational elements are strategy is the first one. So like, how does this even align with your business? How does it make you stand out as a company in your market? Is this part of your vision for your company? If you think of Canva, can you actually make design accessible to everybody without it being product-led? Hell no. Like there's no way you're going to make that model work, approaching people in all countries, all walks of life, all budgets. With the sales-led model, you're like, no, the salesperson's going to be working for free most of the time. And so even onboard people and get them on, it's impossible. So it has to come from there. And ideally, your founder and leadership team has to all be aligned on this and get the conviction from the founder and CEO, the commitment of the leadership team. Because if they don't get that locked in, guess what? Month 3 comes around with that product-led motion or that free trial that didn't work that well, and you scrap it. So that just goes back to the old sales-led motion most times. So that's the first thing. And then the second is, do you understand who your ideal user is? This isn't the buyer. Sales-led companies are really good at understanding like who is that ideal buyer, the decision maker. Let's go after them because they make the big budget decisions. But in a product-led motion, it's all bottoms up for the most part. So it's like, if you think of Slack, somebody might start off with it, share it with their team. And then if it's a big company, they have multiple teams, they share with another team. And then they're like, hey, why don't we like roll this out through the whole company? Now they could do that self-serve if it's, a small company under 50 or 100 people. But eventually if it's like a big company like Microsoft, although they would use their own team product, but if it is, a bigger team, then they would be able to like work with sales to actually roll it all out and get it hopefully a better deal or something like that. So that's how it would work. You got to understand those users. Who are those people that are going to like champion your product initially and get to value, and really what is value for them to really share this with their boss, their other team members, and get that organic virality inside the company. And so you got to understand those users. And then the third thing is the model. So the free model is so important to think about, what do we need to give away for free? Some companies just slap on, and I've done this too, a free trial for 14 days on an existing product without thinking too much about what has to be true for a product-led motion to work. So one of the biggest things is, does this solve like the beginner problem in our market? So I'll give you an example here too. When we launched a free trial at a company called Vidyard, it was a video marketing analytics tool. So you upload the video, then you had to put it on your website, integrate it with your marketing automation platform. And then I could see, oh yeah, look, you watched 50% of our video. Amazing. And yet nobody did that because most people that got there, they didn't have a video actually upload. And this was like 10 years ago. So it wasn't as common or as easy to create these great videos. Nowadays, it'd be easy. It's like AI generate that stuff and just throw it on your site. But back then it was hard. And so what we decided, we were like, we've got to solve that beginner problem. problem of creating a video. So we created a Chrome extension, made it super easy. In a couple clicks, you could record your screen in Chrome, send it to anybody, and then you would see, oh yeah, wow, they watched 50% of that video or 100%. If it's a prospect, you're like, that tells you a lot about, especially if it's going through a proposal or something like that. You have a lot of data now to be like, hey, I saw you weren't that interested, or hey, you watched 100%. Is it a good time to like lock this in or something else? You have signals that you didn't have before. That's the capability of the product that you can experience in a smaller scale. And so that's the first thing, is understanding the model is the 80-20, because a lot of times you can spend so much time on like improving your onboarding, your offer, but then it's like, oh, you didn't even tackle the thing everybody in your market has the problem with. Well, that's not going to work. You just wasted so much time. So those are the first three that I would say most people just skip over and don't focus too much on, but they matter the most.
Also, Wes, you've held up GenSpark as a model for getting users to value fast, and it did cross $155 million in revenue around 10 months. Yet even people who admire it have described stalling inside its onboarding process. Does the 60-second rule survive contact with real products like these?
Yeah, I mean, it depends what you do in tools like GenSpark when it comes to those first 60 seconds. Because right now, if I look at a tool even like a GenSpark or any other new emerging, AI tools that you do try that have like that chatbot interface, the expectation now is quite high for what it could do. It's like, okay, great. You should be able to respond to like basic stuff. It should be better than Google for most things. And then I should get something customized to what I want. Now, the problem is that they're all running into is why use this platform over another, especially as you get embedded. Like I was talking earlier about Claude and how I love it. And I'm like, you get embedded, you get your workflows, it becomes like your friend. Like you have all your favorite stuff here. It's organized the way you want. So the switching cost grows because you now have to build some context in some of those other tools as well that you don't have. And so when it comes to that first 60 seconds, what I think is going to be the hardest all of these tools, and this goes for any company, even if you're not an LLM, is how can we showcase our differentiated value? Because it's not enough to be like, if we just responded to whatever they said, whatever their question was, we got it. It's like, that's not good enough. Like, what is the differentiated part? Now for GenSpark, they are trying to differentiate on, look, we use all the models. Doesn't matter which one, ChatGPT or, Claude, Kimi, doesn't matter. We use them all in different areas. If you want to create music, great. But there's a better model for that. It's not Claude. If you want to code, sure, we're using Fable 5. And so people that like that flexibility love it. But people that don't need that flexibility don't really care. So what are the things we could do in those first 60 seconds to actually showcase that? And that is the challenge when it comes to even what we were discussing earlier with the free model is it can't just be, that, hey, like, look, you created a video or something like that. In VideoArt's case, it's like it had to show the analytics. What percentage of the video did that person actually watch? Because that was actually the same thing in the core product. So if you like that, you love the core product. It's just you roll it out across your entire website, not just, these simple Chrome videos.
One of the popular arguments says every one of the 50 fastest growing software companies run on a product-led motion. So it must be essential. But did that approach actually make them grow, or did they just adopt it because they were already winning?
Yeah. So I think it's a couple of factors here too. It's not just any like broad claim. It's like, yeah, it has to be PLG motion, but the products themselves are really good. And this is one of those things in like, okay, your product-led motion will amplify. It's a multiplier of your product. So if your product is 1 out of 10 better than the alternatives, well, guess what? Even if you have a 10 out of 10 product-led growth motion, you still get 10 as your output. Now, if your product is 4 out of 10 better than the alternatives, which many of those products were. So you think of like a Lovable versus, I didn't even hear about like Bolt or Base 44 or any of the other alternatives for a while. And it was like arguably 4 to 10 better when it came out. Now it's not always the case, but when it came out, and they had a really solid product-led growth motion. It was like literally leading with activation on their homepage, which at that time was like crazy. And so it's like you pair that 4 to 10 better with a 10 out of 10 product-led growth motion, you get 40 as your overall like growth output of how fast you can grow. That is what I think is absolutely fascinating, and like how you can unlock this crazy fast growth for those companies. And if you go through all of them, like they did have a product-led growth motion, they did have a great product. Now Now, it comes back to, was it because of the product-led growth motion? This is where I would argue, yes, because a sales-led motion can't scale that fast. Try growing from 0 to 100 million in like 6 months or 8 months with a sales-led team. It's almost impossible to hire people that fast. It's almost impossible to train them that fast to get that product understood. Now, maybe if you're Microsoft and you have the big resources, you have the capability inside your company to hire, deploy people that fast, you could do it. You could absolutely do it. But for a startup, no. Like, it's just like crazy talk. It's not possible. The product-led growth motion actually allows you to scale your company at a much faster pace than you ever could if you had a sales-led motion. So that's my little argument there, is that there would be no other way. Now, a lot of these companies have now added a product-led sales motion to scale into enterprise, but that's after they got to their first 100 million.
So, Wes, one of your own rules says that a company should assume its main feature will be free within 18 months. So why wouldn't the same thing happen to the books and frameworks that teach AI strategy? And what would make one still worth paying for?
I mean, this is if you create knowledge or you create anything these days, you have to assume that it will be free, essentially, very soon. And so like the top level of, I have 5 levels of product-led companies. The first one's you're just a commodity. And then it's okay, it's forgettable. Level 2, contender, you do something differentiated and you stand out a bit in the market, but you're still a small player. And then level 3 is you're on the cusp of the market, top 3 to 5 player in the market. You definitely are duking it out for that 20% of the market share. And then there's the obvious choice. You are the obvious choice in the market. That's where you get the majority of the market share. But in order to stay as the obvious choice, what I'm arguing is you actually have to become a crusader, which is you might have set out to become the obvious choice. Let's call it design with Canva or something like that. But then it's you have to figure out a business model to make that completely free, because that is going to be the expectation. People just want to be able to do that for free. So what are you left with? Okay, you kind of go up the value chain of, okay, if we made design free, how would that impact teams inside a company? Oh, okay. They would need, design assets, the brand assets all in one place. And you want to always keep growing that bigger problem. So you might make your beginner problem completely free. And then, okay, what are those intermediate problems that people run into? Okay, for teams. And then enterprise, oh, that's more advanced problems that we have to solve for that. And so that's where I would say every company should be thinking about. And if you're not, and somebody else does this, then you're in a pretty difficult spot. Because competing with free is really hard, because it's well, do I want to use the free option or pay for somebody else? And there's very few instances where people are yes, if it's comparable, I want to pay for it, unless it's weird security things for big enterprises where they're they got a little bit better security on some of those pieces. So that's one thing. But I think the second part of your question was regarding knowledge products. If you have frameworks or books or stuff like that, then it really becomes about the application. So one thing we're actively building and exploring at ProductLed too is, if you look at a book, you have to read it, unfortunately, to gain any of the expertise. And it's how long does that take? Well, even though my books are shorter, 2 to 4 hours to read, if you listen to it and stuff like that, that's still a lot of time. And although I would argue it's still great to do that if you're going to build a product-led company, most people don't want to become a product-led expert. And so whether you do a knowledge product or you create a just product in general, if it's going to be product-led, what it has to do is it needs to give anybody the capability to do anything without becoming the expert, without, fiddling around with your UI, without all the pain it takes to accomplish that outcome. People just want the dopamine hit of oh, look, this product now enables me to design. This product now enables me to think better and faster and all these things. And so when you remove all those capabilities, what you're left with is, how can we make this an instantaneous capability transfer? And that's the interesting part. What we're trying to work towards now is train AI with all our books, all our IP, all our client engagements. And now we just will coach you and ask you questions and be oh, you want to build out a new homepage because we realized your sign-up conversion rate sucks. Okay, so that's one, we validated this is the focus area. Two, let's go through this process. We're going to ask you questions you don't have to be great at product marketing. But guess what? This output will make you look great. It will be an amazing homepage. And if it's your pricing issue or something like that, once again, it's like, we'll just ask you some questions. We'll bake the cake together and then you get to eat the cake. That's the best, both worlds. And so that's where I think a lot of knowledge creators need to head towards, is creating that experience where people can experience your IP, your expertise, without the long drawn out process of like, I have to read all 5 books. But I do think I have no plans for myself of stop writing books, because it trains AI so well. And if you use that with the company context that you gain from when people chat with your AI chat, you can still get them the output pretty quickly. So that's the part I'm more bullish on and excited about. But yeah, I still think people will buy product-led growth book because they're like, I want a product-led business, and this is going to give me the mindset of that.
Yeah, because, Wes, I also see that there's this, new, I won't say it's a new jargon though, but productized SaaS has also been in the play a lot.
Yes.
So is it like a hard attempt to meet the product-led growth marketing for services-based companies, or is it something that actually works for services-based companies out there? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you have a good service, it should be productized to some degree. Now, there's always going to be that, I call it, there was like this famous painter, I forget his name, but he was like really good at drawing like the faces, whoever the artwork was. So he had other artists do everything else around it. And then he would spend, the 1 hour of just doing the face. And that was his jam. He was like, I'm really good at this part. Let me just do this. And everything else that took up over 80 to 90% of the time was delegated. So it's kind of the same thing there too. It's like AI can do that 80 to 90% of the work to get that everything else around it. But like for product-led motion, as an example, still like where I could add a lot more value than AI, it's free model. I don't know why, but like I'm really good at deciding like what you should give away for free. And if you give away the wrong free thing, it's really hard to know if you give away the wrong free thing. and then it takes months. And then you're like, why are people not converting? And it's a really expensive decision. So it's like, yes, you can productize to a certain extent. And there will always be like, you could have the like auto mode for the companies that are really small, where it's like, just go ahead with this. It's good enough. But for the companies that are, over 5 million or 10 million or 100 million, it's like, yes, please, like you should absolutely work with us and at least have us double check that, because, AI does hallucinate. It does make mistakes. So where there needs to be a lot of trust, I think that's where you still need to add that human element, because it's like, it's a big decision, could go wrong, and let's make this right. That's actually where I think it, one, will train the AI in the future, but then 2, be an amazing upsell at the end of the day for these service companies to really think about, okay, what does that journey look like? And where does the human add actually a little bit extra value than just the AI doing it all on its own?
Do you think that there's going to come a point when AI stop going to hallucinate as well?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I mean, you kind of have seen different models. Like, I mean, Notebook LM is an example. Like, does it hallucinate? Really? Like within bounds. Like it's just based on the data you give it. And so I think there is ways of training it so it gets really exact and it doesn't bullshit in some ways. If it doesn't know the answer, like, okay, I can't just pull stuff out of thin air here. It has to be based on these resources or these playbooks that have been based on other companies as well. Yeah, I do think the beauty of AI is that it does know how to, it's like improv, like it knows how to jam and yes, and. Yeah. And that's sometimes where you get some good ideas. Like when it has been beating a lot of humans at some of like the world's hardest games, the way it plays games is completely different. And that's where people are starting to be like, oh, it's doing things that we haven't done. It's thinking outside the box a little bit more. That's actually what's going to help us solve some of the world's toughest problems, like whether it's solving cancer, whether it's solving, all these other bigger problems that, go outside of tech, which are still very important to solve. I think it will be really, really cool to see that part.
Wes, one of your own shows, the ProductLed podcast, one of your guests mentioned the majority of their new signups are now AI agents rather than people. So if the buyer becomes a bot, what happens to everything the industry has taught about getting the users to value?
I think the first principles still remain the same though. It's just like, who is the main person that's going to be using your product? So if you think about time to value as an example, do humans want to get the value faster in your product? The answer is always a resounding yes. Like, it's one of those first principles, like Jeff Bezos always said with Amazon. It's like, do people want to get their packages faster? Yes, of course, they do. Now, maybe there's a diminishing return when it gets to like, is it in a minute or is it in 2 minutes? Where like people are like, yeah, I'm not even home. It doesn't matter. So like there is some things there. But if you look at the other first principle, like, do people want to get their stuff for cheaper and get better quality? It's like, of course, anybody will say that. Like, if I could buy this house for like a fraction of what I want to pay for it, I'm like, amazing. Like what the owner wants to sell for it, I would totally take it on a discount on that end. But going back to some of the first principles, agents signing up for your product versus humans, it's just the time to value needs to get way faster. Like, a bot is not going to have the patience to wait, minutes to get to value in your product if it takes forever. They want to sign into your API. They don't even want to sign up for your product, like go through the whole flow using a fake email or anything like that. No, they just want to get to the output as fast as possible. So if like you're a data enrichment tool, it's not going to sign up for Zoom info, go through the onboarding process, and then finally pull a lead list. No, it would love to just go in as a connector or an MCP or a CLI, whatever we decide on the latest USB connector that everybody agrees on. And then it is going to just pull that info and be like, you want to talk to the CEOs at SaaS companies doing these 5 things that all have free trials? Yes. Okay. Here's the top 10 you should talk to today. Actually, these 5 are really interesting. You should talk to them because they actually have been on your site in the last 30 days. So here's what you should reach out to with them about. That's what we want as humans on the other interacting side of it. And we all know, like, whenever like we use Claude or ChatGPT or something and it takes forever to think, we're like, okay, twiddling our thumbs or doing something else. They're losing engagement on this whole process. So it's like, the faster we can get them, the faster everything happens, and the more you win on that level. So nothing has changed really. It's just who is interacting with it and how they can interact with it has changed. But I think the first principles are all still the same.
So, Wes, what's the hardest lesson you've learned that you would pass on to a founder just starting out, or one struggling to grow their company in the time of AI?
Yeah, it just kind of goes back to the analysis of the Brex's list of 50 fastest growing companies. When I kind of came into this world of software as a service, I was really amazed and obsessed with product-led growth, just as a go-to-market model, and how amazing you could get users to value pretty quickly, get them to upgrade. But then, after helping over 450 plus companies now, when it comes to just how do you do product-led growth, how do you get more people to value quickly and self-serve and all that stuff, the thing I realized that matters even more than product-led growth is just, you got to have a magnetic product. You got to have something that's 4 out of 10 better to stand out in this noise. And that's insanely hard. And that's like the next book I'm working on, because I'm like, this is a tough nut to crack. And this is one of the biggest problems we're going to run into, is because it's getting easier to build. How do we build stuff that actually stands out? And it's not always what you think. It's not always you got to have the most funding, everything else. It's like, we're going back to a period of time where it's about being a little more opinionated. When software first came out, it was all about, hey, let's make it easy to customize this tech so you can do whatever you want. Now it's like, hey, look, this is my way of doing LinkedIn for business growth experts, whatever you want to call it. And this is the product, how you can use my approach. And somebody who's like a writer or somebody who has some other kind of business, they might hate it. But for that niche, that very specific niche, they're like, this opinionated approach fits me. It writes like me. I love it. And so I want to see more opinionated products out there that really stand out for their very specific people. So I think this is going to be a bit of a revolution in the sense that there's going to be so many more software companies out there than ever before in the next 5 to 10 years. The long live the micro SaaS. There will be big SaaS that come out of this too, but there has never been a more interesting time to be a product entrepreneur in my world as well. So that's the biggest advice I would give, is just like really focus on building that product that stands out, that is 4 to 10 better.
And what was in this entire process that you learned the hard way?
I was talking to one client a few weeks ago, and he's like, Wes, like product growth is honestly the best business model ever. He is like entrepreneur who has done like many hundreds of millions, just like sold many companies, done all the different kinds of business models. Like, this is honestly the best one. But Wes, your business, not that scalable. Like, even if you hire 100 more implementers, you're still going to run into the problem where it's like you can train people maybe up to like 80% of your competence in some areas, and then you're still going to be better than everybody at like maybe one area, like out of those 9 components, like strategy or your model design, and you're never going to have that full replacement. So it's like, but what could you do? You could create something that is a lot more scalable, like AI agents that are specialized in each of those core areas that could get people there. So it's like, how can I falling into this is I focus so much on helping other people's businesses instead of focusing on my own business of like, what is the scalable version of ProductLed that will scale expertise in a way that helps a lot more people and creates an insanely useful tool.
Well, Wes, before we wrap up, so, coming back to our topic, why AI spending fails without product-led thinking. So, do you think that AI spending fails? Do you agree or disagree? And why?
I mean, if you're a sales company using AI, I don't think that applies. Like, sure, you can still get a lot of benefit. There's still a ton of waste. There's actually, I know this for a fact, there's way more waste of time in a sales company than a product-led one, just because the nature of who delivers the value, who monetizes the value and everything else, it's all human-led versus a product. So you're already at a disadvantage there. But for product-led companies, does AI investment fail? No, like there is going to be if you focus on the core principles, like, okay, using AI to acquire customers better, how can we make that better experience? Using AI to activate users better and faster, you're going to see an immediate ROI on that. Using AI to monetize people better, okay, customize the offers, customize the outreach emails, all those things, like you're going to see an investment and a return on that. An expansion, same thing. But if you don't have the right product-led principles, this is where it gets interesting. If you don't know what you're doing in each of those areas, you can, just like that report from MIT, you said, you can waste 80, 90% of the spend. And that's where I would really recommend learning some of those first principles, whether that's reading the product playbook or the product growth book, to just understand, like, how does this actually work?
Well, Wes, thank you so much for this sharp and grounded conversation. I think there's a lot that our listeners are going to take away from this entire conversation. Thank you for your time.
No worries. Thanks for having me.